بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد. Dear brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to this 53rd episode of the Islamic Fiqh. We talked about breastfeeding and suckling and all that is almost connected to it, as this is part of the chapters that deal with divorce, with marriage, and the things that make a person or a child prohibited to get married to or from. Then the jurors usually talk about a very important issue, which is custody. And a child's custody is taking care of a child when it cannot look after itself, and bring the child up looking after it physically, mentally, protecting it against anything that could be harmful to it, and so forth. So custody in Arabic is hadana, and it is derived from the word hudun, which is when you take your lap as a cradle for a child, or when you embrace a child. This is hudun. So when you take a child, you protect a child from anything that can be harmful. And of course, custody is referred to usually when divorce takes place, because while the parents are married, by default they both give custody to their children because they're still married. But once they are divorced, then this is where the dispute takes place. So what is the ruling? Custody is mandatory. It's obligatory when the parents are married, because they both have to take care of their children. This is their obligation in Islam. No one could say, nope, it's not my obligation, I'm not going to take care of it. They both have to take care of the children, and usually it is the financial obligation of the father, and it's the internal obligation of the mother within the house. Yet the scholars put a lot of emphasis on the father's side, because he is the one who's supposed to upbring his children. And this is called adab, how to bring him up to be respectful, dutiful, not using vulgar words, treating people with kindness. This is usually looked after by the father. Though nowadays a stay-home mom is the best person to do this, yet due to the nature of the mother, which is based on mercy and being kind and soft, this tends to be a little bit difficult. And the strictness and the discipline of the father must show in order for the child to learn and to adopt what is being forced upon him, rather than being requested, as in the case of the mom. Type. So this is understood when they are married, but what about when they are not married anymore? In this case, we have two options. Either the child is accepting different guardians or sort of custodians to take care of him. In this case, it's a cumulative obligation. As long as it is within the 5 or 10 people circle, one of them taking the responsibility is sufficient, so that the others will not be sinful for that. But if the child only accepts one to be his custodian and rejects the others totally, in this case, it becomes an obligation upon that person. Because if that person says, no, this is my right to take the custody or to let go, I'm letting go. If this is the case, then the child would be harmed, if not maybe killed, because the child is not accepting except that particular individual. So it becomes an obligation upon that individual. Usually, the mother is the one, if the divorce takes place, who assumes the position of the custodian. And we will come to mentioning this because this is the hadith of the Prophet alayhi as-salatu was-salam. When a woman divorced or was divorced by her husband wanted to take the child away from her. So she complained to the Prophet alayhi salatu was-salam, who in turn said, you have the right to the child ahead of him unless you get married. So this hadith is crystal clear that the one in charge of the custody, or in the one deserving the custody of the child, is the mother unless she gets married. Now this hadith is the main source for a lot of the schools of thought over the issue of custody. And believe me, it is not an easy thing to decide. It's not all black and white, because there are a number of factors that are involved. Among them would be whether the person, that is the mother, is qualified to be a custodian or to take the custody of her child or not. So the hadith basically talks about an ideal situation where the mother is a practicing woman, she takes care of her kid, and this is the norm. But there are exceptions, and due to the exceptions, it is the responsibility of the Muslim judge to look into the case and decide. And in a nutshell, all scholars of Islam say that it is the benefit of the child that counts. So after all of deliberation and looking into the father's guardianship and the mother's mercy and kindness and where the child would find itself, what counts is the benefit, the true Islamic benefit of the child. And we will come to discuss this because to be a custodian of a child, it's not only to give them money. So maybe the father is a multimillionaire and the mother is a poor woman, and people think with their own judgment that is limited that a rich father is definitely better for the welfare of the child than a poor mother. And this is not true, because taking custody means that the custodian has to look after the child's feeding, nourishment, internal and external cleanliness. And these are all materialistic things, but he has to also take care of, or she has to take care of, when and how he sleeps, plays, the affection he gets, and all other requirements. Which means that it's not only money that counts. As they say, money can't buy you love. But when a child is growing, and is in need of love, this is extremely essential to be provided for the child. Now, from that hadith as well, scholars understood that always a female is given a priority over a male. And this is what the majority of scholars say, and this is debatable. So they say if we have a mother and a father, who should we give it to? By default, the mother. The hadith is clear. What about if we have a father and a grandmother, the mother of the mother? The majority of schools of thought say give it to the grandmother. Shaykh Islam bin Taymiyyah, may Allah have mercy on his soul, says no, we give it to the closest. Who's closer to the boy? Definitely the father. So he has more concern and care over his own child rather than the mother of his mother. And this is again a disputed issue. And this is where the Muslim judge comes in handy, because this is what judges are appointed for, to solve problems, to solve conflicts. Otherwise, why would we have Islamic courts and Muslim judges? And so many times people come to me complaining of this and that, which had happened between them and the siblings, or even them and their parents. And I would tell them, go to the Muslim court and file a case. And they're shocked. They say, Sheikh, how can we file a case against our mother? Well, if your mother made an unfair judgment, so your father died, all of you should inherit. She, as a mother or as a wife of the deceased, must get 1/8 of his wealth. Instead, she is preventing all of her children from selling the house, the different properties, the companies. She has blocked the bank account of the deceased, and the children saying that she's not giving us a penny. And our father left millions. What to do, Sheikh? Oh, the only thing possible is to go to court. Sue your mom. Oh, this is disrespectful, Sheikh. This is being undutiful. Not at all. This is your right in Islam. You're being respectful and dutiful. You're being obedient to your mom, but this doesn't mean that she has the right to steal you or to deprive you from your rights in Islam. This is what a Muslim judge is appointed to do. Therefore, whenever there's a conflict between us regarding the custody of the child, and we're unable to solve it peacefully and diplomatically, which most cases are, they're divorced. The couple were forced to separate one another due to the mistake of one of them. So the husband who divorced or who was requested for khul' has bad feelings about his wife, ex-wife. And the woman feels betrayed. He divorced me after all these years, after all what I've done for him. So they don't have good feelings, the sense, and in a way, towards one another. And this is why Allah mentioned in the Quran the beautiful verse of, through the verses of divorce, when Allah spoke about divorce and the rulings, He said, وَلَا تَنْسَوِ الْفَضْلَ بَيْنَكُمْ. Do not ever forget the good times that were between you two. And definitely, every marriage had its good times, had its ups and had its downs. So a true just Muslim must always remember the good times and act upon them rather than seeing only the bad times and behave accordingly. So, when people go to the judge with this dispute, they're asking the judge to give them a verdict where both sides would feel comfortable and accept that, inshallah, this is the ruling of the Muslim judge, which indicates that this is, with the grace of Allah, the ruling of Allah Azza wa Jal, rather than keep building up hatred and enmity towards one another. Solve it through the court and there is no harm done. Now, who would not accept the call of the court? Those who have hypocrisy in their hearts, because this is the ruling of the Quran and the Sunnah. If they reject it or dislike it, then they have to recheck their Islam once again. We move on to the conditions that are applicable to the custodian. So anyone can be a custodian? Anyone can take custody of a child? The answer is no. There are conditions, and these conditions, most of them are logical, and some of them are based on other evidences, but we cannot go into details. We have to understand that most of the issues covering the custody are ijtihad. These came from scholars who could not find a lot of evidences backing these things up, so they came up with their own opinion according to their knowledge, according to their previous readings and research about different issues in this regard, bearing in mind the benefit of the child. So the first condition is that the custodian must be a Muslim. Now, people must understand that Muslims have their priorities set. My priority is Islam. I do not care what human rights say, what the laws of a country say. What counts to me as a Muslim is what Islam says, and I have to maneuver within. And I have to weigh the pros and cons so that I would not put myself in trouble, I would not jeopardize my safety or the safety of my child. This is why whenever someone says, what's the ruling on a Muslim marrying a Christian woman? We often get this question, either due to the fact that this brother is living in a Kafir country and he's unable to get a Muslim born Muslimah, so he sees this Christian woman who doesn't have a guardian, who doesn't have any problem going out with him, dating him, and definitely marrying him is a plus, and she does not have the same requirements of a wedding, of a dowry, of this and that, like the cultural Muslim women do. So she, in another expression, if we can say that, she's cheap, not literally, but she doesn't cost much to get married to. Or because she is different than the Muslim women he's used to. So he doesn't like brunettes, he likes blondes, for example. So he rushes to marry her. We say, Akhi, this is not appropriate. He says, why? Is it haram? Didn't Allah mention in chapter 5, verse 5, that we can marry women of the book, of the people of the book, Jews and Christians? So why are you saying, Akhi? I'm not saying it's haram. I'm saying it's inappropriate because we have thousands of cases where after a couple of years of enjoying marriage, after she gives birth to 1, 2, 3 or more kids, something happens and she decides to call it a quit. Call it, if you wish, mid-age crisis. Call it that she's fed up. She found a better solution. She doesn't like your guts anymore. She doesn't like anything. She just wants a divorce. So she takes a divorce, and by law, in her kafir country, she takes the children's custody. And most likely, half of what you possess. Cars, houses, businesses, she takes half of it. This is their kafir man-made law. Then you come knocking on our doors and weeping and saying, Sheikh, what can I do? My 3 girls are with her, I can't see them, and she's taking them to church every Sunday. Sheikh, what can I do? My eldest daughter is getting married tomorrow to a Christian man, and I have no say. I cannot do anything. Well, akhi, I hate to say it, but we warned you and you didn't listen. So this is a big problem. And we're not, again, saying that this is haram, that marriage to a Christian woman is haram. A'udhu billah. This is permissible in the Quran. But you should only attempt to do it when there is a real need for it, or you feel that this woman is really close to Islam, or you are desperate, either this or falling into zina. There are many reasons that would justify, but just for the sake of marrying someone, while there are numbers of Muslims around you, at least to take care of a kid, then you have to look into it. So the first condition is that the custodian has to be a Muslim, which means that the hadith where the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wassalam, you have the right to the child ahead of him unless you get married. This is when the woman, the wife, is a Muslim. If she's a non-Muslim, Christian or a Jew, she cannot have the custody of the child. Full stop. A kafir cannot take the custody of a Muslim child, because this defies taking care and providing the best upbringing to the child. A kafir cannot do this, because a kafir would upbring your child to be a kafir like him, or at least not to force him to make any decision. You want to become a Muslim, you want to become an atheist, you want to become anything, up to you. And what kind of a upbringing and taking care of a child would that be? Definitely not acceptable. Secondly, this custodian has to be a sane adult. So a child whose parents had died cannot be given to his brother who's 14 years of age. He's not an adult. He needs someone to take care of him, let alone him taking care of his kid brother. And he has to be sane. So I can't give the custody of a child to his autistic 3rd grade brother or sister. If the mother is mentally ill and she cannot take care of herself or harms herself due to a mental illness, I cannot trust the child to stay with his mother because she's not sane. Thirdly, there has to be integrity, honesty, and chastity. So if a man divorces his wife, the wife goes and claims the right of custody, the judge looks into it. Is she a chaste, honest woman with integrity? The husband comes with ample proof and evidences that she is a woman that is not chaste. She has great deals of immoralities in her. She goes to nightclubs. She has boyfriends coming over, some of them staying the night. And the guy has evidences, private eyes, investigations, confessions of her relatives. And the judge can see that from the way she's dressed. She is coming to court with a miniskirt, flashing her flesh. How can he give the custody of a 5-year-old girl to such a woman? Definitely this is out of the question. And this is not something that can be black and white. So some courts consider a man shaving his beard to be fisq, an obvious apparent sin, which according to the parameters of the scholars is something that deprives a father from custody of his kids, because he's shaven, he doesn't pray in the masjid, he has a television set and he watches movies and listens to music. All of these are sins. So the majority of schools of thought say that this cannot be a good and suitable guardian to his son. Some scholars said that, whoa, now you guys are getting way overboard. Among them is Ibn al-Qayyim. Ibn al-Qayyim says it is right to say that integrity and honesty cannot be a condition for someone to take the custody of a child, despite the fact that the scholars of Hanbali and Shafi'i schools of thought, as well as other scholars, consider it so. So this is an issue of dispute. To make it a condition, he says, Ibn al-Qayyim, is very difficult to justify. How can we justify such a thing? Had it been so, if we would make integrity and honesty a condition, had it been so, most children would be lost and the community would face immense difficulties. Why? Because not everybody is perfect. So yes, maybe the father is well shaven, clean shaven, and doesn't pray in the masjid, but he cares for his son way more than any other person. He protects his son, he feeds his son, he gives his son love and try to make him the best person. So his sins is something that is between him and Allah. His transgression is something that is between him and Allah, as long as it does not impact the boys or the girls' safe upbringing. The fourth condition is physical and financial ability to look after the child. If the guardian is blind, how will he take care of the child? If the guardian is handicapped and cannot move without a wheelchair, for example, how would he take care of the child? If he is poor and doesn't have a house and keeps on being kicked out from one premises to the other, and he cannot barely feed himself, let alone feed the child. So this does not fulfill the conditions of being a custodian. We respect people with special needs, but a deaf person or someone who is unable to communicate would not give the best upbringing to the child, and hence cannot be a suitable custodian to it. Fifthly, the custodian must be a person of good common sense. So, yes, he's loving, he's caring, but if he is not sensible, whatever money he has, he can spend it in a minute. And he squanders the wealth of the child he's supposed to be custodian of. So such a person would not be a suitable guardian or a custodian for the child. Now, all of these conditions apply for both men and women. But there is a condition for the mother where the Prophet said, ﷺ, you are entitled to take care of him unless you get married. The Hanbali school of thought said that this hadith is as it is. But the most authentic opinion is that even if the woman gets married, she can still keep the child, providing that she's married to someone related to the child. So now we understand the hadith in a different way. If the mother of the child married someone who's a total stranger to the child, in this case, the hadith applies. We take the child and give it to the father of the boy. But if she married someone who's related to the child, so for example, a man divorces his wife and she marries his brother. So now she's married to the uncle of the child. There's no problem in that, because he will take care of the child as long as he gives his approval and has no problem in his nephew being brought up in his house. There's no problem in keeping it again, inshallah. There is also another condition that scholars had put, and again, these conditions are not all based on the Quran and the Sunnah, but they're understood from the Quran and the Sunnah, because Allah Azza wa Jal kept this issue within the parameters of the scholars to look into, within their ability to come up with rules and regulations. So one of the conditions is that the custodian has to be a mahram, especially when it's a girl. So if a girl's father dies, her cousin cannot take responsibility and says, I am her custodian, because he's not mahram. He can do that just until she reaches the age of 7. And after that, that's it. She has to go to somewhere else, either a mahram male, an uncle, a brother, a grandfather, or to a female. A female cousin would do, because the same gender, we have no problem. But to have a man taking care of a girl who's not mahram to him, this is totally prohibited in Islam. Okay, there are a number of rulings applicable to custody. Among them is that the mother's relatives always have stronger claim to it than the father's relatives. And we said that this is what the majority of schools of thought say, yet this is not the most authentic. The most authentic is, which Ibn Taymiyyah says, that the closest to the child is more worthy of it. So a father and a mother, by default, the hadith says the custody is for the mother. A father and a grandmother, the mother is not there anymore, or she's not qualified. So the judge's choices are the father and the mother's mother, the grandmother. The majority of scholars say the mother of the mother takes it. But Ibn Taymiyyah says no, there's no evidence from the Quran or Sunnah saying this, so we give it to the father because the father is closer in the absence of the mother. So all what you see here, such as the child's mother, but when there is a factor that prevents her taking custody, such as failing to meet its conditions, then the child's custody transferred to her mother, that is the grandmother, then her grandmother, then the child's father's mother, then the child's full sister. So they're insisting on giving it to females all the way, from the mother's side, if not then from the father's side, etc. But this is not the most authentic opinion. The most authentic is the closest of them. So if we have a maternal aunt and a paternal uncle, definitely the maternal aunt. A full sister or half a sister, the full sister gets it because she's closer. She's a sister from the father and the mother. And likewise, if a brother, a full brother from the father and the mother, and half a sister only from the father's side, definitely she goes, or the child goes to the full brother and not to the sister who's half sister. And this is the most authentic opinion. So it is the father's responsibility for payment of the child's custody. So okay, the mother took her child, the divorce took place, they fought over custody, the mother of a child was awarded with the custody. Is that it? No. The father of the child is responsible for his clothing, for his feeding, for getting him a place to live in with his mother and siblings if he has siblings. So he's responsible for payment, financial payment for his children. And unfortunately, I get thousands of complaints of children stating that after my father divorced my mom, he left us for like 20 years, never contacted us, never sent us a penny, never cared about us. And these type of fathers would be held accountable on the day of judgment. If Allah willed that they should suffer in this life, then this is a mercy from Allah, that Allah is making their torment and punishment here in this dunya. But if they are living a good life, an easy life, everything is being facilitated for them, then let it be known that in their graves after the death and on the day of judgment, they will suffer immensely for this grave and serious sin that they neglected their children in such a fashion. So how long should the custody be? What's the duration of it? Well, scholars say that when the child no longer needs the assistance and the care of his guardian, this is when the custody is over. So if a child is self-sufficient, he's grown up, he's become an adult, then there's no need for custody anymore. And some scholars say that this is when a boy reaches 7 years of age and a girl reaches 9 years of age. And they have different evidences backing this up. Some make it a little bit more, some make it a little bit less. And the other views are when the child reaches a level of understanding and ability to choose. He is given the right to choose. So the judge brings his father and mother and addresses the child. Who will you choose from them? And whoever he chooses, he's awarded custody. And if the child changes his mind 3 months later, then he is awarded custody to the other spouse or the other parent, because what determines the custody now is the choice of the child, and he can change as many times as he wishes. This is where he finds his heart and tranquility. So the judge immediately awards the custody to the one that the child had chosen. And this was backed by a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ told a child once, this is your father and this is your mother, take either one's hands, and the child took his mother's hand. Now, this issue of giving the choice to the child is an issue of judgment by the judge, because at the end of the day, what we want is the benefit of the child. So if the mom and dad are both righteous, practicing Muslims, would care for their child immensely, whatever the child chooses, we give the custody to that parent that the child chose. But if the child chose and explained to the judge, he says, I'd like to go with my father, because my mother always nags me and tells me to study and to offer my prayer and to sleep early, while my father lets me play with the kids down the hood, and he never tells me to pray, and he makes me eat sweets and whatever I want. Immediately the judge would say, well, you are given to your mother because she knows what's good for you, and definitely your father does not know what is good for you. So what counts is al-maslahah, the benefit of the child. This is what counts most, and this is what the judge would usually take care of and be sure that it is sought after and implemented for the benefit of the boy or the girl. So we will stop here, inshallah, and we will move to the questions. And in the questions, we have question number 30. Fariq says, what if the husband is not taking care of his wife financially and she has to work? Well, Allah Azza wa Jal stated in the Quran, الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم. Men are guardians over women for two reasons. One, due to the fact that Allah preferred and favored men over women, بما فضل الله به بعضهم على بعض, and due to their financial expenditure. This is why if a husband is unable to fulfill his wife's financial duties, he's unable to provide her with a house, he's unable to provide her with a daily allowance to eat and drink and go to the doctors, etc., whether he is stingy by nature or because he's unable, in this case, the wife has the right for separation, and she's not obliged to obey him. And she can also refrain from giving him intimacy at night due to the fact that he is unable to fulfill his duties as a husband. This is not a charity. It is something you have to do in exchange for what I have to do for you in return. So if a husband is not taking care of his wife financially, she has all the right to divorce him. Not to ask for khul'a, rather to divorce him, because the judge would immediately award her divorce due to this inability of the husband to provide for her. Now, she says that she has to work. No, she does not have to work. It is his job to provide for her. And if he does not, what's the point in staying in a marriage when she has to work? Might as well work and ditch him. Why stay with him if he's not man enough to provide for you? So working in general for a woman is okay as long as the conditions are fulfilled. So she can work in a segregated environment. She can work in halal jobs. She can work when there is no danger for her safety and security. Yeah, this is okay. But to say that, wallahi, my husband is not providing for me, so I have to work in a mixed office where I sit with strange men for 8 to 10 hours every day. I see them more than I see my husband. Definitely, you cannot put fire next to fuel and pray to Allah that it does not catch up fire. This is impossible. So you have to make a decision. Maybe you have to involve your parents to speak to him and force him, if needed, to provide for you and your children, even through court. Some men take this for granted. And they say, why would I pay a penny from my earnings when my wife works and she has a good job and she can pay the rent, she can pay the schools of the children, and she can buy her food, etc. That's fun. Yeah, this is like going to the fun fairs and having someone giving you money to play. This is not manhood. This is not how a Muslim behave with his wife. Muhammad Tariq says, what about a man who does not give his wife her rights and does not accept to divorce or to accept khul'? We've answered this, I think, maybe later before, and said that if a man does not divorce and his wife is unable to stay with him, she gives him her dowry back, seeking divorce, and he still refuses. This is not a real man. A woman who does not want to live with you anymore. Be a real man and set her free. Why would you keep her in bondage, enslaved, when she doesn't want to live with you anymore? Have some dignity and try your level best to talk her out of it. But if she's adamant and insisting, let her go, akhi. If you don't, you're sinful at the sight of Allah for whatever she does. And she has, alhamdulillah, the right to go to court, show her case, and the court would summon her so-called husband, and the court would either ask him to divorce or to accept khul'. If he decides not to, then the court would do fasakh, dissolvement and breaking of the marriage, overruling any decision he has, and the court would force him to separate, and she could go and marry someone else if she wants. Lyric says, Sheikh, what is the ruling praying in a masjid that has innovation in it, like doing the adhkar in congregation, raising the hand at the end of the supplication, sending salutation upon the Prophet ﷺ after the adhan? Should we pray there and then leave after we give salam? Or should we say the adhkar in ourselves, like the sunnah says, and stay because of the reward that is staying in place until we finish the dhikr? First of all, this masjid is a masjid of innovation, meaning that the people there are full of innovation. And what is the ruling on praying in a masjid of innovation? The innovation can nullify Islam, such as the innovation of grave worshipping, or stating that the Prophet ﷺ is not a human being, but rather he was created from the light of Allah, which is his attribute, or claiming that the Prophet knows the unseen, alayhi salatu wasalam, and that he is Hazir Nazir, and that he controls the universe as he can control the palm of his hand, and that he roams the worlds and attend gatherings which has Mawlid in it, etc. All of this nonsense can take a person out of the fold of Islam. So you cannot pray in such a masjid, and your prayer is invalid behind such an imam who has such blasphemous beliefs that are not founded neither in the Quran or in the Sunnah. Never ever practiced by the companions or the tabi'een or tabi'at tabi'een. Simply a clear innovation, but a takfiri innovation that takes him out of the fold of Islam. Other innovations do not take you out of the fold of Islam, such as believing in the Mawlid, doing congregational dua, saying adhkar that were innovated, giving thana and na'at upon the Prophet ﷺ in the masjid, reciting salutation before the adhan or after the adhan, publicly and loudly. All of these are innovations, but a person is still a Muslim. Sinful, but Muslim. So yes, in the first you cannot pray in that masjid. In the second you can pray in that masjid. Now your question is, should I remain seated after the end of the congregation while they're doing their public innovation such as congregational dhikr and dua, or should I leave? No, the answer, you must leave. Staying with them gives them quantity, gives them amount, credibility. And people would look and say, oh, mashallah, big gathering, because you're there. But if everyone following the sunnah immediately leaves the prayer hall or the masjid and does his adhkar on the way out, they would know that, oh, there are people following the sunnah who are not approving of this innovation. And their numbers would be less and less every single day. So this is what you should do, and Allah knows best. Lyric says, I have a question that is not maybe very essential to know, but just to gain some knowledge. We know that those who are given the book from the right are the people of paradise, and those who are given their books on the left are the people of hell. What about, but is there any fatwa for those who will go to hell until they are free from sins and then will enter Jannah? Those people from which side the book will be given? May Allah bless you. Allah knows best. This is in Allah's knowledge. We know about the people of Jannah, we know about the people of hell, the right and the left. Those are who are in between. Most likely, if eventually they will go to Jannah, they will be given their books in their right. But we don't have a clear indication, a clear line to separate between this and that. So we say Allah knows best. Safer to say that rather than to speak without knowledge. Wallahu a'lam. Fatima says, who is the double-faced one? The Prophet ﷺ said, the worst of all mankind is the double-faced one who comes to some people with one face and to the others with another face. The hadith is crystal clear, Fatima. You can understand this from the explanation of the Prophet ﷺ. A man with a double-faced who goes to the righteous people and pretends to be righteous and practicing and making dhikr and interested in what they do as if he has nothing to do with anything else. When he goes to the sinners, to the innovators, he mocks the righteous people and practicing people. He says, well, yesterday I've been with these people, they act so funny, they speak so funny, and they are like a bunch of hypocrites. Man, I love the life you guys live, and this life of theirs is horrendous. They should, and they need to get a life. So he is a man with two faces, pretending to be this and pretending to be that. Aminata says, can someone call Allah with the 99 names every day? I've answered this before, I think, wallahi, in this platform or somewhere else. I'm not sure. But you cannot call Allah with his names as dhikr. So I cannot say 100 times Allah, 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 Allah. This is disrespecting Allah's names. You can call Allah with his names if you have something to say to him. And I've said this, I think, here. Now I remember. If someone says, Ya Asim, Asim, and I said, yes, and he keeps on saying Asim, Asim, I would say that this guy is crazy or he's disrespecting me. But if he says, Asim, give me a book, there's no problem. Here's the book. When you call Allah, you have to ask him. You have to beg him. So you use the 99 names of Allah, with which is relevant to the name. So if you say, for example, the most powerful, you don't ask Allah for forgiveness. You don't say, oh, most powerful, forgive me. And when you want Allah Azza wa Jal to destroy Israel, for example, you don't say, oh, most merciful, most forgiven, destroy Israel. This is inappropriate. This means you don't know the meanings of Allah's beautiful names and attributes. So when you want forgiveness, say, Ya Rahim, irhamni, have mercy on me. Ya Ghafoor, ighfirli, have forgiveness. So you call Allah with the suitable name, and you ask Allah with what you want, rather than just repeat the name without any benefit of that, and Allah knows best. Mukhtara says, my cousin lives abroad for the past 10 years. His wife is living with her in-laws with a boy, but her husband doesn't communicate with her or his family. Is the marriage valid? The answer is yes. If the man is married to his wife, even if he does not speak to her for 50 years, she's still his wife. If he dies, she will inherit, and she has to spend the 4 months and 10 days iddah. But why would such a woman stay married to such a person? This is dependent on a number of factors. Maybe she doesn't have any place to live if she were to be divorced. So living with her in-laws is the easiest of the two evils. Maybe she has hope in him coming back one day. You never know. So these marriages are dependent on the circumstances and reasons why such no communication takes place, and they are still married without any doubt until he divorces her or she files for khula. Last question, Idris says, in the West, people with good credit can buy a car with zero interest. The dealership usually finances the car. Is this transaction permissible, especially if one has enough saved up to pay it off immediately in case of death? Now, if you did not say especially, and the statement that followed, I would have said, yeah, no problem. But when you say this, especially if one has enough saved up to pay it immediately in case of death, made me feel that this is a riba-based contract. So if you are in the West, it's a non-Muslim country, most likely, I go to the dealer's shop and GM Motors, and they have this beautiful Escalade, fully packed and beautiful. So I say, how much? And they say this is like $60,000 or $70,000. Whoa, that's a lot of money. I can't pay that. They say, no problem. You have good credit. We trust you. We checked on you, and you've never defaulted on a loan. So we will sell it to you for 5 years, where you will pay monthly X amount of money. 0 interest. So I started to drool. Wow. Okay, I'm for it. No, wait. Before you go, Sheikh, it's interest free. 0 interest. Why are you stopping me? Hold your horses. 5 years, no interest. What happens if you go past these 5 years? So if it's a 6th year, if you defaulted on a payment or 2, I don't know, I didn't ask. Well, this is the time for you to ask. You have to go and ask them. If they say to you, it's interest free for 5 years, after that we will take interest because you did not fulfill the conditions and did not abide by the given period of time. In this case, it's haram. It's riba based. So even if you have enough money saved to pay it immediately, then pay it immediately. Why buy in installments? This doesn't make any sense. So no, akhi, if there is a condition stipulating that if you default or if you delay payment for a month or 2 or more, that they will charge you a negligible amount of interest, this is totally haram and prohibited, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. This is all the time we have for today's session. Until we meet next Monday, I leave you fi amanillah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.